Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Thank you for stopping by. Let me start with some macro thoughts. China's yuan weakened past the key level of 690 versus the dollar this morning in offshore trade. And the more I think about it, essentially I feel we're now on the cusp of some even more violent moves in these markets. I think the dollar is going a lot higher, US interest rates as well. And if you have an interest in exploiting this, then do get in touch. This is a breakout in Treasury bond yields. A 3-decade-long bear market in yields is now officially over, says Peter Brent. Targets for the 30-year 437 and 504. I wrote bubbles are bursting just about everywhere. This is a bubble burster. Earlier in the year, or last month, I'd done an interview with Sputnik when I'd said US is weaponizing the dollar. I said then it was a reference to Turkey. Turkey will not be the last to be targeted. I also said for the foreseeable future, I do not see gold, the Chinese renminbi, or crypto replacing the dollar. It's not going to happen in our lifetimes. US 10-year Treasury yield, this has topped 320 now. This chart is from J.S. Blockland, which was something I was speaking about when I wrote Mirrors on the Ceiling, the pink champagne on ice, and I was talking about just this kind of move, normalization in interest rates and the risks it posed to kind of comatose investors. Donald, if you want to find the culprit for the rise in prices, you need to look in the mirror, Putin says. Brent crude, of course, continues to ramp higher. This chart is from T Commodity. And as I said over the weekend, Trump has become increasingly strident about high prices, which is a little cute, given that it is his sanctioned warfare, especially against Iran, which has lifted prices. Home thoughts, anybody want to take a break in the marvelous Nairobi National Park, please call Will Knocker. Great photograph as well. And this photograph from Will BL of hippos in the Luangwa River. Political reflections, the Ministry of Defense Russia says 49 military vehicles of the S-300 system, including 4 launchers, have been delivered to Syria to protect our personnel. Training of Syrian officers to use the hardware will be completed in 3 months. Last week I wrote Putin needed to shut out Netanyahu over Syrian airspace or shut up, and he's chosen to shut him out, notwithstanding some comments out of the Israelis. Very interesting piece by Andrew Coburn, who says that the US policy in Syria and Iraq has been likened to playing chess while mistaking the knight for the bishop and thinking castles move diagonally. Theresa May entered the conference yesterday with a backdrop of ABBA, Dancing Queen. Watch this short clip from Reuters TV. She's obviously taken her African dancing mojo back. And I must say, she has pivoted. She's showing a gentler side to her, more inclusive side. I thought it was a good speech, and somehow or other she just manages to hang in there. And really, they're on a suicide mission. If Boris brings her down, he brings down the Tory party, and that is something that he's got to consider. December 2013, which might seem a long time ago, I wrote a piece called "The Pivot to Asia Bears Its Fangs." And I said then, I see the pivot to Asia as the encirclement of China, then the shrinking of its operating theatre, and then lighting the tinderbox that is the periphery, and Xinjiang might well morph into China's Afghanistan, I said. Vice President Pence, in a speech expected later today at the Hudson Institute in the US, is to tell China, we will not be intimidated in the South China Sea. He is sharpening US criticism of Chinese policies around the globe, will give China a blunt warning on Thursday that the US will not back down from what Washington sees as Chinese intimidation in the South China Sea. Pence will say a Chinese naval vessel came within 45 yards of the USS Decatur as it conducted freedom of navigation operations in the South China Sea, forcing our ship to quickly maneuver to avoid a collision. Despite such reckless harassment, the United States Navy will continue to fly, sail, and operate wherever international law allows and our national interests demand. We will not be intimidated. We will not stand down, Pence said. Pence will also accuse the Chinese Communist Party of convincing 3 Latin American nations to sever ties with Taiwan and recognize China. These actions threaten the stability of the Taiwan Strait, and the United States of America condemns them. And while our administration will continue to respect our One China policy as reflected in the 3 joint communiques and the Taiwan Relations Act, let me also say that Taiwan's embrace of democracy shows a better path for all the Chinese people, Pence will say. Well, that's going to go down a treat. As a senior career member of our intelligence community recently told me, what the Russians are doing pales in comparison to what China is doing across this country. Look, only in August last year I wrote China Rising, and we've seen a significant pushback since then. In August I said, apart from a few half-hearted and timid FONOPs, China has established control of the South China Sea. It has created artificial islands, then militarized those artificial islands across the South China Sea. It is a mind-boggling geopolitical advance any which way you care to cut it. And now we're at this stage when the US is pushing back real hard. The US Navy is proposing a major show of force to warn China. US Navy's Pacific Fleet has drawn up a classified proposal to carry out a global show of force as a warning to China to demonstrate the US is prepared to deter and counter their military actions, according to several US defense officials. The draft proposal from the Navy is recommending the US Pacific Fleet conduct a series of operations during a single week in November. Goal is to carry out a highly focused and concentrated set of exercises involving US warships, combat aircraft, and troops to demonstrate that the US can counter potential adversaries quickly on several fronts. While the proposal for the week-long exercise has been driven by the US military, carrying it out during November when US midterm elections are taking place could have political implications for the Trump administration if the US troops are challenged by China. This flow map shows the 15 largest import and export partners of the USA. Its 2 navies and China are the most important business partners. In this, a US Navy photo is showing a confrontation between the USS Decatur and the PRC warship 170. I go back to July when I asked who blinks first. I said Trump after bashing on Justin Trudeau of Canada, Mexico's Enrique Peña Nieto, now upended, of course, and then firing a few broadsides at Europe, has now turned his attention to Xi Jinping and thrown him the keys, challenging him to a cheeky run. This is great breadth, right ad, Robin Farsad. This threw me, Trump and Tupac, you seriously need help if you still claim that President Trump is a racist and hates people of color. My black Americans, please quit falling for the same old Democrat playbook and think for yourselves. That's a bit of a stretch. Not by thinking for yourself, but he's a great defender of black rights. Malaysian prosecutors filed money laundering charges against the wife of former peer Najib Razak. She has pleaded not guilty to 17 counts of handling funds from unlawful activities. Her face is quite extraordinary. Let's move on to the currency markets. We've seen some big developments here. Euro dollars below 115 at 114.96. Dollar index has crossed 96. Japanese yen 114.27. Swiss franc 0.9907. The pound 129.73. The Australian dollar has tumbled 0.7080. India rupee at a fresh record low of 73.775. South Korean won has softened 11.2927. The Rial 390.18. Egyptian pound 17.9113. And the Rand softens a large amount, last at 14.7232. As I said on August 20th this year, I believe we're embarked on a very big rally in the dollar. There's a lot further to go. Essentially, the US has been raising rates, making holding the dollar more attractive, reducing the supply of dollars. Previously, emerging and frontier markets have been showering in a golden flood of cheap dollar liquidity, had been borrowing dollars like there was no tomorrow, but are now scrambling to find those dollars because the golden shower has been switched off. This is a dollar index chart from Pinecone Macro. We're headed back to 100. The euro has dropped below 115 as the move in treasuries is triggering dollar strength across the board. Commodity markets, gold still being capped by the strong dollar but trading at the 1200 level. Iran's crude is in Russia on an oil for goods deal sold to other nations. That's from Lee Sachs. They're trying to explore the limits of the sanction, US sanctioning, the way they can get around it. Emerging markets, Brazilian stocks are up a whopping 7.5% in 2 days as far-right candidate Bolsonaro shows strong momentum in election polls. I wrote about the oil price over the weekend and I said this is a double whammy for many emerging markets, strong oil, weak currencies. With India and its Prime Minister Narendra Modi as sitting duck, for example, Indian 10-year bond yields rose 9 basis points to 8.21%, and the rupee dropped 0.5% to a fresh record low, which sums it up. Sub-Saharan Africa, the World Bank released Africa's Pulse, which is an iconic Africa release that they put out twice a year. They're saying GDP will probably expand by 2.7% in 2018. That's down from 3.1% that they forecast in June. The road ahead is bumpy. The tightness of oil supply suggests oil prices are likely to remain elevated through the rest of the year and into 2019. Sluggish expansion in Angola, Nigeria, South Africa, the three biggest economies, cut its estimate for South African GDP to 1% this year from 1.4% before, and sees growth remaining subdued. Cut its forecast for Nigerian growth this year by 0.2 percentage points to 1.9%. So they're estimating growth picked up to 2.7% from 2.3% last year, barely above population growth. Have a look at this. The gap between the global and Africa spread has widened. This was something I was referring to when the MB index hit a record narrow, and I said it was how long it was going to last was anybody's guess, meaning it wasn't going to last very long. In the first half of 2018, 6 frontier economies in the region raised a record $14.3 billion in Eurobonds. I'm glad they went early. That was the only chance. The market is not shuttered but expensive. The region's economic recovery continues, but at a slower pace than expected. Um, Economic activity remains solid in fast-growing non-resource-rich countries such as Côte d'Ivoire, Kenya, and Rwanda, supported by agricultural production and by services. Looking ahead, region is expected to rise to 3.3% in 2019. Reflecting these vulnerabilities, risks to the growth outlook are tilted to the downside. Key external risks include an unexpectedly sharp decline in commodity prices, an abrupt tightening of global financial conditions, and escalating trade tensions between the major economies. The main domestic risks are fiscal slippage, domestic conflicts, and weather shocks. Although foreign direct investment and foreign aid remain the major components of capital flows, portfolio investment has experienced an uptick since 2013. Change in composition of capital flows has a higher risk content as captured by greater vulnerability to commodity prices, global interest rates, and currency movements. Talking about Nigeria's recovery faltered in the first half of the year. South Africa's economy slipped into a technical recession following 2 consecutive quarters of contracting economic activity. Excluding Nigeria, South Africa, and Angola, growth in the rest of the region has been broadly steady. Inflation rose sharply in Ethiopia and Sudan. Ethiopia, the rapid increase in inflation, expansion of credit to the public sector passed through a currency devaluation and political disruptions. In Sudan, the monetization of a large fiscal deficit caused inflation to rise rapidly. Government debt is estimated to have increased by more than 20 percentage points in the region. Share of foreign currency denominated public debt increased by about 2/5 from 2010, 2013, 2017. At the end of 2017, 8 countries, Chad, Eritrea, Mozambique, the Republic of Congo, Somalia, South Sudan, Sudan, and Zimbabwe, were classified as in debt distress. Additionally, previous moderate ratings for the Gambia, Zambia, and Ethiopia were changed to high risk of debt distress. Major components of capital inflows in sub-Saharan Africa are FDI and foreign aid, on average 3.36 and 3.35 of GDP respectively. Remittance inflows account for 2.26% of GDP. Extraordinary article in the Wall Street Journal about a $500 million central bank heist and how it was foiled. This is about Angola. An accountant walked up to a teller at a suburban London branch of HSBC Holdings and asked to transfer $2 million to Japan. The teller pulled up the account and stared at a screen. There was $500 million in that account. HSBC quickly found out where the money had come from. 3 weeks earlier, in mid-August 2017, officials at the Central Bank of Angola had sent $500 million of the country's reserves to a company registered to the accountant's modest storefront office between a cafe and a barber shop in a gritty London neighbourhood. Ocean's 11 style cast of characters, including a smooth-talking Brazilian based in Tokyo and a Dutch agricultural engineer. Their alleged plans, said Angolan government officials in court documents and interviews, was to siphon fees and cash from the central bank while pretending to set up a $35 billion investment fund. The money trail led investigators to international banks, shell companies, and a Japanese firm whose mission is described on its website as assets liberation. One looks at this and thinks, wow, what's going on here? It's the kind of thing that shouldn't really happen. Angola's lawyers say the country may have fallen victim to a decades-long-old type of get-rich-quick scheme typically used to defraud individuals or companies, not sovereign states. Investors are told they can make huge returns through a private market. And bank guarantees there is no such market. BNP Paribas logo, signature of the French bank's chairman, compelling proposal. ECB was meant to be involved, and basically they started transferring funds from the sovereign wealth fund. It involves the previous president's son, a whole cast of characters, and it's really an incredible article delving deep into the problem. Once the $500 million was in Perfect Bit's account, you can't make it up. The accountant made Mr. Barbosa an associate owner of the company. The accountant kept signing power on the HSBC account. Over the next few weeks, the accountant and an associate of Mr. Barbosa's each visited HSBC branches trying to access the cash unsuccessfully, according to Angola's UK court claim. And you've got to read it in full. It's a really extraordinary article. It's the beginning of the year, I said I'm keen on Angolan risk, and I said the devil is in the detail of the execution. However, I would probably look to be long Angola Eurobonds. If an egg is broken by outside force, life ends. If broken by inside force, life begins. So said Prime Minister Abiy yesterday. The ideas for political reform are initiated by the EPRDF, and the reform will be sustained if the party generates and guides bold ideas that matter most to the people. If an egg is broken by outside force, life ends. If broken by inside force, life begins. He is pushing for unity after months of ethnic violence. South African all shares down 7.28%. Dollar versus rand. The rand is on the slide again. Back at 14.7232, the Egyptian pound 17.9113, Nigerian all share down 15.14% this year. Ghana Stock Exchange is up 12.85% this year. Organic Kampala, great photos of Kampala, take a look. Uganda makes Sub-Saharan Africa's first major move to tighten policy. They raise rates by 1%. The currency is weak. Take a look at this World Ultra Wealth Report 2018 and see where Kenya ranks in the creation of ultra high net worth money. Nairobi all shares down 12.73% year to date. Kenya's worst performing stocks through the end of September: Uchumi minus 80%, ARM minus 79.2%, Eveready minus 58%, Home Africa minus 53%, Mumias minus 50%, Kenya Power minus 49%, Housing Finance minus 44.2%, TransCentury minus 42%, Kenya Airways minus 41.7%, Nation Media minus 40.5%, NBK minus 38%, Centum minus 34.9%, and NIC minus 27.4%. 24th of September, I wrote a piece, Bears roam the NSC and the number of zombies grows. To that point, NSC 20 is down 22.91% year to date, and I appreciate you stopping by.